Join us. Welcome to our Leadership Challenge series. We are honored that you have made a decision to allow us to be part of your journey. Neil and I are truly excited to be collaborating together in a joint partnership to assist business leaders in leading their teams and organizations to new levels. We'll be facilitating these free webinars each Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The format really is one of facilitation and collaboration, and we look forward to hearing from you as well. If at any time during the days between our next call you have a burning question, please feel free to contact us by emailing us at info@roosconsulting.com, info@roosconsulting.com, and we will be in touch with you within 24 hours of your inquiry. The format for today's call will be that Neil and I will present a topic and highlight key elements, after which we will open the line for you to ask a question. You can raise your hand to ask a question by simply typing your name in the chat box to the bottom right of your screen, which will let us know you have a question, or you can simply type in your question and we will respond in order of submittal. If a question occurs to you during our presentation, don't hesitate to immediately type in the question and we will respond at the appropriate time. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please text your question to our assistant Julie at 917-689-9895. That's 917-689-9895. Without further delay, I would like to introduce my valued partner, Neil Strickland, who will start this series for us.
Hi, thanks, Lorindy. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Neil Strickland. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. The topic for discussion today is lead and get out of the way. The message is about empowering your people in order to get the very best out of them. We've broken it up into 4 subtopics. The first one is, are you the ideal CEO for your business? The second one is the principles that great leaders live. The third one is, are you a manager or a leader of your business? And the last one is a personal study of some great leaders that we have observed. It's intended that our sessions will be interactive in nature. Lorindy and I will speak about a topic for about 5 minutes, after which we will open up the session to you to contribute, comment, or question for about 10 minutes before moving on to the next topic. The purpose of this is to facilitate discussion and for each of you to learn from each other's experience. There's no such thing as a stupid question, and you are amongst friends here. We'll then move on to the next topic until all 4 topics have been discussed, and we'll then wrap up with some final questions and observations, as well as highlighting what we will be discussing and facilitating in our next session, Session 2, on September 5th at the same time. We used a method for recording our notes called mind mapping, and you'll see that on your screen at the moment. It's a structured way of presenting information so that related information appears in the same place, and we will be sending you copies of these notes to you by email once the session is over. Let me kick off the session by talking a little bit about whether you are the ideal CEO for your business or not. Most CEOs are not introspective and don't really ask themselves if they are the best person for doing the job. Instead, they just assume that they are. I'd like to challenge each of you to reflect on 2 key questions. What unique attributes do you possess that makes you the ideal CEO for your business? And the second question, are you a good fit for the business in terms of a number of different criteria? Looking at unique attributes first of all, there are 4 typical profiles that leaders have. First, enormous experience in one core area. Secondly, multifaceted experience in many different business disciplines. Thirdly, they may be an excellent people person with natural leadership traits. And lastly, they may be a visionary entrepreneur that consistently operates at the leading edge of his or her industry. The question is, which of these 4 do you tend to be, or indeed, are you, in fact, a little bit of each one of them? Moving on to good fit for business, there are lots of different styles at the end of the day, and you may in fact have several different, I suppose, different ways of operating, and it's not actually a pure yes or no, am I a charismatic individual, or do I not have the correct characteristics for running the business. So there's about 10 different ones that we often look at here, including the two I've already mentioned. There's also leadership style. There's cultural match with the organization that you're running. There's effective communication. Are you an effective communicator with all the people that you touch? Are you a strategic thinker that is ahead of the game the whole time? Are you an excellent leader for bringing in change, or do you abhor change? Are you an inspirational team builder? And one of the ones that is very close to my heart is, are you open to hiring people smarter than yourself? So I open it to the floor now to ask any questions or make any comments that they wish about unique attributes or good fit for the business for them as a leader of their business. Any questions out there?
Neil, one of the things that looks like a question that just came in is, I would like to know what the unique attributes of a leader are. Do you want to respond to that question?
Yes, yeah, sure. I'm quite happy to do that. There are lots of different measures depending on who you talk to about the qualities of a leader and what you typically see. In my experience, I would kind of use the ones that Tony Robbins espouses. He would put number one as having hunger and drive, that you're absolutely passionate about your business. Number two, he would have down as having a compelling vision that engages those around you. Having certainty around what you're delivering with your vision is really, really important. Effective communication is one of the ones we talked about already. Again, good leaders are always effective communicators. One of the ones that you and I would be very strong on, Lorindi, are the ability to care, connect, and break patterns with people. Because without that connection, you're never going to achieve anything within your organization. There's an interesting quote that you often hear by Robin Sharma out there. You manage with your head, but you lead with your heart. And they're two different ways of managing or leading a business. The other thing that Tony Robbins would say is that you would tend to have unreasonable expectations and standards, so that you're a hard taskmaster, but you are fair. You would have courage and faith and commitment to what you're doing. You're insanely persistent in what you are doing, but you're flexible in your approach, so you're not ramming it down people's throats that they must do it this way. It's the output that's important rather than the input. And then the final one that Tony would say is that you need to be authentic and congruent. So these would be the top 10 from my particular point of view. I don't know whether you have anything to add to that, Lorindi?
No, I think that you and I are pretty mutually aligned on that, and I think that, as we'll talk about in the next section about the principles that great leaders live, is that really the leader sets the pace for what the organization or the people within the organization are going to, how that flows, what that flow is going to look like. And so if we're very scattered and fragmented as leaders, our organization will also probably be very fragmented and scattered. If we're systematic, it's easier to have systematic people following in our rank and file. So why don't we go ahead and move into the principles that great leaders live, and then there was a question that came in, but I think in part this next section answers it, and if not, then we can come back to it. So the principles that great leaders live are, there's a variety of these principles, and it's not to say that we will execute on every one of them, or even that we would execute on every one of them every day. But I think that most good leaders have 4 or 5 of these key attributes that present consistently and frequently. At the top, we talk about being confident, thoughtful, steady, and committed. And confident does not mean arrogant, but it means that we're committed to our vision, and that we're thoughtful about how we communicate that vision, and that we're steady in our approach. Also that we are empathic. So similar to what you were talking about, where Tony Robbins talks about how we lead with our hearts, that we see all the angles and respect the ideas and feelings of others, and not just respect, but honor them through allowing them to test it out, as it were. That we allow our teams to bring their ideas forward and bring them to the table. Without going through every one as we've outlined, let me just drop down to fostering mentorship. You know, it's not an easy task to be a good leader, and very often we can find ourselves stuck in the minutia and down in the dredges, as it were, of the tasks and the tactics of day to day. And when we find ourselves in that situation, it's going to be hard for us to find time on our desk to also lead out in front and then foster and mentor people on our team. You know, employees, it's been proven over and over again that compensation is one of the last considerations that an employee looks at when he's looking for a company to go to work for, especially as we're talking about the younger generation, you know, the mid-20s to the mid-30s. Compensation is something that they kind of assume that we've done our homework and we're going to be fair, but their ability to contribute and their ability to attach to social issues always ranks much higher than even in compensation. So if we're not fostering and mentoring our teams, they probably won't stay around, because there are other opportunities for them to contribute in meaningful ways within their teams and to the world, quite frankly. So, which also kind of gets back to, Neil, what you were talking about relative to authenticity, and that we know who we are, we know who we're meant to serve, and we know the type of people we want to attract to our team to help serve the world, as it were. And then finally, I'm really big on systems and precision around those systems. And it's something that we're always working within our own organization to fine-tune and improve. And we don't do it perfectly either, but it's something that I think when we have a system in place, it's been my experience that then we can lead with our heart, because we have the system, we're working the system, and then we're allowing our empathy and things to bleed through, so and to shine through, as it were. One of the questions that came up was, how do we attract people to help us with this? This person says, I know I need to attract individuals who are smarter than me in some cases, but I struggle to attract those kind of people on my team. Do you want to take that, Neil, or do you want me to speak to it?
I'd love to hear you talk about it. Okay.
So, you know, I've read The Law of Attraction, and I think there are certain parts of it that resonate, and there's other parts that maybe not so much. But I do think that people are attracted to us when we put out energy that is, we will attract the kind of people that we produce, the energy that we put out. So let me restate that in a more succinct way. The type of energy that I put out will attract the similar energies. So if I want to attract people who have knowledge, and even maybe knowledge that I don't have, then I need to put out there to the universe, to my peers, to those that I associate with, those are the kind of people that I like to work with. And it needs to become part of our vocabulary, you know. And on the other hand, if I lead in a way that is very kind of utilitarian, and at the end of the day there's no democracy in my leadership, then I'm probably not going to attract people who have knowledge that I don't have, because it doesn't take very long for our communities to figure out the type of people that we honor. So, do you have any other thoughts on that, Neil?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it takes courage to actually take a hard look at yourself and see the skills that you're missing in terms of what your organization needs, and to have the courage to stand up and say, I don't have that. I got to buy it in. I got to go get the best person I know out there to come in and help me and not feel threatened by that person and let them do their job when they do arrive.
Right. I guess that's part of the, sometimes we can be too controlling because, we're afraid, that we won't be able to predict the outcomes and things like that. And we need to allow empowerment to occur organically within an organization so that when people bring ideas and bring knowledge that we consider it and that we think about it and we're thoughtful about it. It's interesting, one of my mentors, Michael Port, talks about how important it is. Tim Sanders wrote a book about likability and how likability improves connectivity. And he was talking more about in the sales and marketing cycle, but I think it also holds true within our organizations, is that you will attract, I personally want to work in friendly organizations, and I want to work within organizations who have a friendly atmosphere. I'm not saying everyone has to be friendly, but those are the kind of people that I'm going to be attracted to work with, and that, being real and being authentic while we have empathy, and then making sure that we're relevant and that we're staying relevant and that we can all evaluate daily. So as a leader, how friendly am I? How authentic am I? How empathic am I? And am I staying relevant to my teams? If I'm going to be the kind of leader that spends more time on the golf course than on my business, then I better have someone on my team who understands my vision, that I empower to make sure the day-to-day is taken care of. Because there's not a right or a wrong, but there is a system that works and doesn't work. And being an absentee owner with no direction for your teams is probably not going to work out very well either. So.
Sure. I would add one final comment to that, and that is that we all have people we touch within a business, both inside and outside. So you've customers coming in, or clients. You have suppliers. You have departments within your own business or whatever. The thing that's really important in here is that a leader inculcates within the organization the importance that every touch that somebody has with the organization, it feels like you're dealing with the same person, with the same respect, with the same message, with the same commitment, and the same high service level. And that starts at the top and works its way down.
It's true. Okay, let's go on, Neil, to the are you a manager or a leader of your business? We have about 20 minutes left in our call, so.
Okay. We kind of look at managers and leaders as being on the continuum, I guess, where there's a full range of different behaviors, starting with what I would consider to be low-achieving managers who typically exhibit certain behaviors, and on the other side of the continuum, you have high-performing leaders who typically behave in a different way. There are great benefits in having 360-degree feedback from all of those around you inside the organization and outside the organization to see what you really are at the end of the day, because you may feel that you're a popular boss, but your staff may pursue you or perceive you as being an arrogant bully. At the end of the day, which are you? Do you lead from the front or do you push from the rear? And how you think about it and how other people think about it is really important. So in terms of this continuum, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the attributes of low-achieving managers. The low achievers tend to see business planning as their domain, and their subordinates are only required to execute on the plan. They tend to ask for everybody's opinion, but they never implement the suggestions that come from the staff. And at the end of the day, our belief is that a lot of the best ideas in an organization will in fact come from the shop floor. Low-achieving managers also see knowledge as power, and they keep it very close to the vest and share only the minimum of information when they get some leverage out of it. One of the things that I hate to see in an organization is micromanagement and focusing on correcting mistakes of others, because it's the opposite of that that actually creates high performance within a business. Again, low-achieving managers nitpick and lose sight of business goals because they're so busy looking at the minutiae within the business. And they tend to hate change and fight to remain, doing the same thing and maintaining the status quo. When you move over to the other side of the continuum, you're looking at high-performing leaders. They have a clear vision about where they're taking the business. They're completely focused on bringing the entire team along with them. Information to them is not power. It's something that they need to put out there and share with their subordinates so that even better ideas will come back. And they do evaluate all of the alternatives and go with the best ideas on the team, not just their ideas, which frequently can be wrong. They're firm, but they're fair. They ignore the little things and focus on the results instead. They create an energy in the business that allows the employees to go and do the job whatever way they want, and they'll deliver on that basis rather than having somebody standing over them. They're inspirational, they inspire people to outperform, and they tend to be open to change and embrace it warmly. So the question I have for everybody in this call this evening is, if you look at that continuum of low-achieving managers and the behaviors they exhibit, and look at the other side of it where you have high-performing leaders typically exhibiting a different set of behaviors, where do you actually fit on the continuum if you're honest about it? Are you somewhere in the middle? Are you at the low end? Are you at the high end? What are your views on this? We'd love to take your questions. Any questions out there? Or any comments from Lorindy if nobody wants to put their hand up?
Right, I think that, again, the answer to this is that as a leader, you will decide and you will set the pace. And Neil and I aren't here to tell you how you need to. We will have suggestions. We believe that through our own experience in the study of others that there are certain attributes and performance measures that work better than others. But at the end of the day, I think it's, again, knowing who you are as a leader, being authentic about that, and then promoting that authenticity through our own actions, right?
Sure.
A question that just came in was, how does one break through their fear? I guess I'm assuming this means, how does one break through their fear of leadership, or just in general?
Well, maybe fear of letting go, and that is a big challenge. You know, it's feel the fear and do it anyway, I think. Would you agree with that?
I agree. You know, I had a very dear friend when I was going through a particularly tough time in my life about 12 years ago, who said something that I always remember in business and in life, and that is that sometimes the only way through it is through it. So the person came back and said it's actually fear of failure. And what I would say to that is we can sit in indecision and be worried about failing, or we can, and be sure to fail. As we sit in that indecision, we definitely will fail. Or we can go to our teams and evaluate the information that we have in front of us, make the best decision that we can, and then get moving. And as things go, typically there will be some corrections, course corrections that occur along the way, but we'll get moving. You know, one of my favorite examples of this is Martin Luther King's, the movement that Martin Luther King was so instrumental in. And, you know, he had a vision for where he wanted things to go. He had a vision for a different future for himself and his family and his community, but he didn't sit in his office and just write about it. He actually took action and he started walking. And, you know, we all remember him now, and we just celebrated his birthday, or the 50th anniversary of the march. And interestingly, that speech has been come to known as "I have a dream" speech, when that wasn't actually how he had labeled it. But what had happened was, after he finished his speech, someone, I think from the crowd, said, "I have a dream," and then he went into that. He continued on that theme. So interesting that he had, because of who he was charismatic, he was passionate. We remember him, a nation remembers him for that speech, and it's still a barometer against somewhat what we measure ourselves. You know, I was reading in the newspaper this morning about people really wondering, is the dream still alive? Are we as a nation still sewing into that, or are we 50 years later have just kind of forgotten about it and it's kind of a cool adage but not something we really believe in? So, but fear is sure to do one thing, and that is to stop us. It's a dam that stops our creativity. It's a dam that stops us from progression and growing. And sometimes we have to just get going so we can grow. You know, another one of my mentors always says, if you don't know what to do, do something. So any thoughts on that, Neil, from you?
Yeah, I mean, the reason that people fail is not due to the fear. It's probably a lack of resourcefulness within themselves or within the team. And typically good leaders will create breakthroughs, whatever the breakthrough might be. You know, they're people of real influence. They're prepared to take risks. And typically they will have failed many times along the way before they got to where they are right now, because if you don't make mistakes, you don't make anything.
Right. Sometimes we expect too much of ourselves. Sometimes we expect inhuman leaps, right? Supernatural, superhuman acts from ourselves and from our teams when we just need to move forward. So, and you know, if that's something that you personally need help with, Neil and I would love to help you with a breakthrough if that's something that you're currently struggling with. So let's go ahead and move on to personal study archives. Any good leader has a good library, and that library should be consistently growing and expanding. Neil and I decided to share with you a few of our favorites. One of the best works on this, in my opinion, is John C. Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And kind of my takeaway from that is that you lead to serve. And through service, you lead, and you lead through service. So it kind of works hand in hand. We already talked about Martin Luther King and why I honor not just him, but the people who were so instrumental in what occurred during that time in our nation's history. Was that people had a vision and they got into action with that vision. Abraham Lincoln is a great example of being firm and steadfast in the face of adversity. You know, and in America's Civil War, he had some really tough decisions to make, and he went against the norm and against what the majority was saying in order to make a big impact. One of my favorites, I think, because as leaders we can get caught up in a lot of frenetic activity, and sometimes we can feel a lot of pressure, and Yonggi Minyor Rinpoche, The Joy of Living, is a work that taught me how to be quiet, confident in my leadership. And not quiet because I don't speak my mind, but to be more thoughtful. And that sometimes decisions do have to be made on the spur of the moment, but there are many decisions that a good hitting the pause button can go a long way. You know, going back to Maxwell's book, when approximately 15 years ago, when I was charged with expanding a company to, you know, 4 or 5 times its size in a matter of 4 or 5 years, I relied heavily on Maxwell's book, and it really changed how I viewed myself, it changed how I viewed my teams, and it really benefited me, and I believe it benefited my team such that I retired from that organization 10 years ago, and all but one of the 6 leaders that I hired are still engaged and still working at that organization. And for me, I couldn't have left behind a better legacy. So, do you have any thoughts on that, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I have been following. I've been following an author called Robin Sharma. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. It's an unusual little treatise, but it's all done by way of fables and anecdotes, but there's true meaning in it at the end of the day. And he says there are 8 rituals of visionary leaders, which I really like. It kind of synthesizes it down into the kind of behaviors, again, that we like to see within modern leaders. The first one is linked paycheck to purpose. You know, you pay people for doing the job that you want them to do at the end of the day. He also came up with that one I mentioned earlier, manage by the mind and lead by the heart, although Tony Robbins quotes it as well. He says, reward routinely but recognize relentlessly, which I think is a really important one, that your people are your greatest asset, and they need to feel that every day, that they're what the business is about. He also says surrender to change, because change is it's a facet in our lives. You know, it's never going to be the same again, and the pace is only getting quicker. He said focus on the worthy and forget about the ones that are not worthy. He said leaders need to lead themselves as well. It's not just about leading other people. So, you know, they got to inspire themselves too. They say, see what all see, but think what none think. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that one. You know, you got to be different from everybody else. You got to see what everybody else is tuned into, but you got to be a step above all of that and think differently. And the last one that he throws out there is link leadership to legacy. And I guess good leaders, you know, whether they're trying to do it or not, do create a legacy, as you've highlighted there with Martin Luther King and Abraham Lincoln in particular. They created the legacy while they were living it. It wasn't their intent.
It's true.
Any other comments from you?
No, I was, well, actually I was thinking as I was listening to you speak that, you know, a great leader knows how to mentor and encourage readership amongst his team. And, you know, a good idea, I remember when I started working with my teams 15 years ago, I purchased a copy of John Maxwell's 20 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership and wrote in each copy for each of my leaders and why I thought it was pertinent for them. And then we use that as our handbook. I still typically, as I lead teams and as I go into teams, I will do the same. I'll purchase books and allow them to see hopefully to see some of what I've seen. And then also I encourage them to tell me about books and materials and things that they value as well. So, do we have any questions from our participants on any of, you know, personal study archives or anything, or is there anything that you're currently struggling with that we could help you with as a leader?
We've got a very shy audience today.
We do. Well, we don't need to belabor it, but maybe we could talk about just quickly what a couple takeaways are for us.
Okay.
You want to just type those in, audience, for us about what your takeaway from our session today is. For me,
yeah, I beg your pardon. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
we'll
ahead.
share too. For me, you know, Neil, something you talked about that was really helpful for me was, you know, the leading with the heart. And as you also talked about, that human beings have to execute. And a lot of companies say that their employees are their greatest asset, but when the balance sheet and the profitability statement become more important than encouraging our teams to help us improve those balance sheets and those profitability statements. We can kind of find ourselves in a sticky situation. So thanks for pointing those ideas out. How about for you, Neil? What are your takeaways?
My takeaways. I guess it's the fact that people are always out there looking to see what other leaders are doing, when really they should be looking inside themselves, because that's what's going to deliver for their organizations and for their people at the end of the day. You know, a little bit of self-examination and being humble at the end of the day. One thing I don't like to see in leaders, although it's frequently out there, is arrogance. You know, we're all at different levels within an organization, but we all have something to contribute at the end of the day. And I like reflective individuals in leadership roles that, you know, will talk to the people that make the coffee and sweep the floor and get a real sense of their organization, and don't just concern themselves with the direct reports. You know, you've got to get the essence of your organization, know your people, and talk to them frequently.
Right. One of my partners that I worked with for several years used to, when he would call rank and file in to his office, the question was always, if you were CEO for the day, what would you do differently? And it was interesting to hear the input. You know, one of the questions that just came up was asking if we could talk about keeping a clear vision of where one can go as a leader of their organization. And I think back to what you were just talking about, Neil, is really the answers are within us and inside of us. I've always said that everything that we need to know is between our head, our hearts, and our hands. And sometimes we just need to do more introspection, and then we will find the people who support our vision, not just in our workplace, but also out in our communities and on the bookshelf even. A couple of the mentors that I'm working with today, the reason I'm working with them is because as I read about them, our values were mutually aligned, so it made it an easy transition for me. Even Neil and I working together, we were pretty clear as to who we are, what we valued, the kind of people that we wanted to be in service of, the kind of clients we wanted to serve, so that as we started to develop our relationship through a networking situation, over time, Neil didn't have to bend in crazy ways, and neither did I, because we were mutually aligned. We already knew who we are. We know why we do what we do, and so it was easy to form a partnership, and the rest of it was just working out the tactical details at the back end. So how about you, Neil?
No, I mean, I'm at one with you. You know, we found each other by accident, and you know, our relationship just goes from strength to strength because we're aligned so well together. And I do think there's providence out there. I don't know if everybody out there believes in a God, but you know, some things are just meant to be, I guess.
Yes. Well, so, and go ahead.
I'm just conscious of the time, Lorinda, here, because we promised people we'd take them on board. We give them 45 minutes. We start on time. We'll finish on time. So I feel that we should perhaps wrap it at that. We are available to answer questions by email if people want to get in touch with us, and also to say that this particular presentation and discussion will be available on the Roost Consulting website from tomorrow if people want to have a look at the session again. Our next session will be on September 5th at 4 p.m. EST, and this one will address practical strategies that build great teams. We do hope that you'll join us once more on September 5th, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending and pass it over to you for the final goodbye, Lorinda.
Thank you, Neil. Again, thank you everyone for taking the time and for allowing us to be part of your journey. If you found information helpful, we would love to get a shout back letting us know what was helpful. And also, if you know anyone who could benefit from this series, we would love to be a part of that journey and just share our hearts. So until next time, have a great week. And for those of us in the U.S., enjoy your Labor Day holiday, and we will see you next Thursday.